Welcome back, everyone, to AC Live at the 0 to 3 annual conference in sunny Florida. I'm extremely lucky and grateful to be with Dr. Junlei Lee, a professor at the Harvard Graduate School of Education and many other esteemed affiliations, which I'm sure he can fill us in on. You just gave a really invigorating and engaging plenary. The entire audience was just, enwrapped by your remarks. So I'm curious, can we take a step back for the audience, and can you just let us know, are we being too narrow-minded in how we define quality when it comes to childcare?
I think we have been very well-intentioned in the way we define childcare, and I think one thing what we can do now as the science for child development and the science for quality continue, we can try to adapt to that. And in addition, I think as we start to experience greater and greater diversity in the settings and the people who care for children, so we can also expand our ideas on what quality look like and feel like. Once upon a time, I think it was just easy to think of quality as the things you can count easily. So books and math blocks and the right furniture and the size of your playground, or the number of teachers who have the right credentials and so on. Those are the things that are easier to count. Mm-hmm. But most of us, you don't have to be a researcher to know, even as a child, as a parent, as a grandparent, that you know that the quality isn't defined, for example, by the furnishing in your house or the size of your backyard, but it is by the kind of simple everyday interactions you have with the children in your care. And I think the closer we can get to understand equality in that way, the more inclusive the definitions and the measures of quality are going to be.
That's great. And as we work towards a more inclusive definition of quality, how do we achieve equity, keeping in mind that we also want quality?
I think one of the keys of achieving equity in that sense is it's very hard to achieve equity if you think of quality primarily in terms of having resources, because the very notion of inequity is that people did not have the same resources. Mm-hmm. So even as we try to bring more equity to the access to resources, we can acknowledge that many, many, many helpers for children and families who work in low-resource communities are nevertheless incredibly resourceful to use whatever they have, inventive if they need to be, but they use whatever they have to strengthen the bond they have with the children and strengthen the partnership they have with families. And I think the more we can recognize quality as that resourcefulness rather than counting of the resources, the closer we get to understand equality in the equity terms rather than in terms of kind of this perpetual gulf that separates high resource and low resource communities.
That's great. And for our viewers at home, can you give an example, maybe something that surprised you? I know you've traveled the world where you've conducted your research and made many observations. Can you give us an example of that resourcefulness that you're talking about?
So one of the things I think here in the United States we take for granted is ratios. You have to have a pretty low ratio between teachers and children in order for a relationship to happen, for example. And for the longest time I thought, yes, that's obvious. You must have that. And over the summer we traveled to a mountainous region in China that were hours and hours and many landslides away from the nearest airport. And we go to these villages, and for their 3-year-olds, they have to have 35 kids in the classroom. For 5-year-olds, they go up to 55.
Wow.
It was a kind of ratio I have never seen before, but I see what the teachers did using the limited time, material, and interactions they have to help all these children to feel like they belong, to feel like they're learning, and to engage them. And the kind of things they do seem so ordinary. I think I was just enlightened by the possibilities of resourcefulness. And if on something that seems so obvious to us as ratios, that you can actually go halfway around the world and see a different way to use resources, right? So people, I think in those villages, they don't think of having 50 kids primarily as a challenge. They think of, wait, maybe these kids are resources for each other. So instead of everything about the teacher, the children can do much more together. Now, I'm not trying to say that, oh yes, let's just start packing 55 children into the same classroom. I'm just highlighting out the possibility that in low resource communities or communities who have limited access to resources, that it is possible to observe high quality practices. And if we can recognize that, we can support them and we can supply resources, but in a way that's targeted, that supports what they're already doing rather than diminish what they're trying to do in these communities.
That's great, and you just touched on this for my next question. 0 to 3 is the professional home of many folks involved in early childhood education, but what can our viewers at home do to help support access to high quality, equitable programs? You're talking about driving certain resources in a very thoughtful way, but what's some practical advice for the professionals that couldn't join us today?
I think the way we think about it, for all the professionals who are out there, if you are a professional in the early childhood field, whether you work with children and families directly or whether your job is to support other professionals who work with children and families, or whether you're a supervisor or you're an assessor or researcher or you set policies in a city, in a community, I think each of us, if we just think about what is our circle of influence and who are the human beings, and more importantly, what are the human relationships that are within our circle of influence? And no matter what we do, if we just ask the question, how can what I do or what we do as an organization that helps to encourage, enrich, and empower the human relationships around us? Now, I don't have the answer for any one particular person, but I think if we thought about it, we will be able to identify and name things that we can do within our sphere of influence. And if even just half of us, even if 10% of us start to think like that, start to do our jobs like that, I think we're going to start to have a very different kind of system that honors and cherishes the human relationships that are built around the children.
Thank you so much. As you know, 0 to 3 is all about connections. I appreciate that. Where can people learn more about your work? Where can they find more information?
The one resource we have developed that's completely free and will remain free in perpetuity is all on a website called simpleinteractions.org. And there are tools on the website that can be downloaded and printed as you wish to think about the human interactions between adults and children, but also between adults and adults. And there are linked papers and presentations and so on. So anyone who's interested, you're welcome to go there and explore.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lee. It's been really enlightening, and I'm so glad we could share more of your plenary with our viewers at home. This is our last AC Live for today, but you can tune in tomorrow at 0to3.org/AC Live, and we hope to see you there. Have a great night, everyone.